Good morning. Buenos dias. Welcome to the final day of the 41st U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce National Conference, the largest gathering of Hispanic business leaders in America. During this morning's session, Bridging the Wealth Divide, our very own Chairwoman, Alice Rodriguez, will be in conversation with Jamie Dimon, Chairman and CEO of JPMorgan Chase & Company. Before we begin, a word from our signature sponsor, JPMorgan Chase.
Latinos are a key driver of labor force and economic growth in our country. However, in a COVID-19 world, it feels our community is under siege. According to the CDC, Latinos make up 34% of cases, almost twice the rate of our 18% share of the population, and a testament to Latinos' disproportionately high representation in the nation's essential workforce. JPMorgan Chase is committed to lead and innovate as we address the persistent and troubling issues our community faces. To date, we've given $250 million to address the public health and long-term economic challenges caused by the pandemic. And over the past 2 years, we've invested $10 million in Latinx communities across the U.S. We're also helping our customers navigate their financial needs through this crisis, such as delaying payments or increasing lines of credit for customers and small businesses struggling financially due to the coronavirus. The pressing need to expand economic inclusion may be an old problem, but its solution requires new partnerships. Business, community, and government working together is the only way to overcome the obstacles to economic inclusion. I'm Carolina Giannicelli, head of the Private Banks Law Firm and Professional Services Group at JPMorgan Chase. Thank you.
Esteemed colleagues and honored guests, please welcome the USHCC General Counsel, Raúl Salinas.
Welcome to day 2 of the 2020 National Conference. We had a very successful day, and we heard from some very powerful individuals and corporations impacting our Hispanic business community. I am Raúl Salinas, General Counsel to the USHCC and a member of the Board of Directors. We're using this opportunity to bring together thought leaders from leading organizations who are driving much change across the country nationally that impacts us locally. I am proud to welcome all of you this morning to our feature presentation highlighting JPMorgan Chase & Company. We are joined this morning by our dynamic speaker and board chair, Alice Rodriguez, who will be moderating this panel. With more than 33 years of banking experience with JPMorgan Chase, Alice has risen to the top of senior management in one of the most important financial institutions in the country. Most recently, Alice was named to head JPMorgan Chase's newly created Community Practices, Engagement, and Inclusion effort to align the bank's national marketing strategies with local community engagement. Welcome, Alice. Our guest of honor in this dynamic conversation is none other than Chairman and CEO of JPMorgan Chase, Mr. Jamie Dimon, who runs the country's largest bank. Mr. Dimon has been at the helm of the bank since 2006, and he oversees an institution whose core values are fairness, integrity, and responsibility. We are thankful for the support of JPMorgan Chase in our national convention, and we're deeply honored to have Mr. Dimon be a part of it. With this in mind, please join me in welcoming Mr. Dimon. And with that, Alice, I now turn it over to you to begin the conversation and the dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, Raúl. And Jamie, thank you so much again for spending some time with us. As Raúl said, this is the second day of our conference. We've had some dynamic speakers like Administrator Jovita Carranza has been with us. We've heard from the Honorable Henry Cisneros. We've heard from Senator Marco Rubio. So a lot of great, feedback on how the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce is working on building America's business future. And we think that with the force that we have in terms of the number of Hispanics in the country, 61 million strong and growing, as well as the growth of the Hispanic businesses in the country, roughly about 20%, it's critical for us to have the right agenda. So we look forward to your comments. And I thought it might be good, Jamie, for people to hear about you from a personal level first. You've often talked about your heritage in terms of your immigrant grandparents. And as you know, I'm the daughter of an immigrant. We heard Henry talk about his grandparents immigrating from Mexico. So maybe just a little bit about your personal life, just to get us going.
Yeah, no, Alice, thank you very much. And everyone, thank you for spending a little bit of time with me. And Alice, we're very proud of you. And the job you're going to do now is probably one of the most important you've done in your banking career. And so, you know, shockingly for a lot of people, they find out that the chairman and CEO of JPMorgan, my grandparents, 3 of them immigrated from Greece. One was actually born here, half Greek, half Italian. None of the 4 went to high school, or they didn't finish high school, put it that way. And so my father was the first one in my family who went to college. My mother didn't go to college until I went. So, you know, I was now 18 years old, and she decided she wanted to go get a college degree. And I mean, you know, the strength of this country is built on immigrants. I mean, anyone who doesn't know American history should know that that's true. And I also want to point out, we're lucky to have Mexico as a neighbor. I mean, you know, Mexico is a great country. It's growing well. It's maturing. It's like, you know, I travel around the world, and very often your neighbors are quite hostile to you. They're not. You know, they're a friendly neighbor, and we can grow together. And anyway, so my grandfather was on his deathbed when I was made the CFO of what was going to be a Fortune 500 company, Primerica. I remember the tears in his eyes when I told him that, the notion that his grandson would be. But I wish he had lived, I mean, obviously died a long time ago, to see chairman and CEO of JPMorgan. I mean, that would have just been something that he would have believed in. And I, by the way, grew up in AOC's neighborhood, Jackson Heights. So she and I have at least one thing in common. And so.
And Jamie, if your grandparents were to come to America today, what do you think they would say, you know, just about the opportunity? Do you think it would be different?
I don't really think so. You know, I mean, it's a great question because, you know, a lot of those folks, when they all came, you know, they came with nothing. You know, they came with the shirt on their back, and you know, he started, as he told the story, you know, he got here. They very often got help not by family, but by distant relatives and stuff like that, who gave him a place to sleep and helped him get a job. And his first job, I think he was 19 or something like that, was as a dishwasher. He says he was a terrible dishwasher, and but I think people still try to give people a hand up. Most Americans, when you travel around this country, they respect the immigrants that work in their communities. They're doing a lot of the hard work, you know. And so I think the hostility, if you go way back then, there was hostility, immigrant groups against each other sometimes. You know, they didn't like each other, but they all had something in common in America, which is a land of freedom and free enterprise. And you know, a lot of them left places where terrible things were happening. So today, I don't like the rhetoric of today. You know, it just is ugly, and I don't know if it was that ugly back then. And you know, are we less welcoming, you know, to immigrants today? Yeah, we are. You know, and if you look at American history, it's always been kind of a cycle: more welcoming, less welcoming, more welcoming, and I think we should be welcoming to our immigrants.
Yeah, I mean that was my experience growing up, Jamie. Just you know, watching my mother not knowing the language here, having to overcome adversity, but you know, this resilience that I saw in the DNA of all of my aunts and uncles and cousins. So I couldn't agree with you more. Shifting gears a little bit, you know, you heard in the video, my colleague Carolina just talked about the impact that COVID-19 has had on the Latino community. And, you know, I reported on our opening day that, you know, the CDC reported in August that Latinos had a 4.6 times higher hospitalization rate. So as you think about what JPMorgan Chase is doing to really help the community, particularly this impacted community, what can you share with us on what's been going on?
Yeah. So I mean, it's terrible to hear that, and I know it's true, and it's true for the Black community too. And but one of the and I'm not a health expert because there are a lot of health issues around that. But what I do know, when COVID happened, is that, people say, oh my God, it's hurting the poor community more. But, the fact is, every time something happens, it could be a superstorm Sandy or the hurricane in Houston or recessions or stuff like that. It's always the poor community suffers the most. They don't necessarily have the better nutrition, they closer living quarters, they can lose jobs at a faster rate than other people. They don't have rainy day funds set up. And to me, it highlights something we already knew, that we need to do things better in America to help our communities, and particularly the lower income communities and immigrant communities, et cetera. And to me, one of the things we're trying to do at JPMorgan Chase is, what are those things, and Alice is a deep part of this, is what are we going to do in affordable housing? What are we going to do in making mortgages more affordable? There are 25 million underbanked and unbanked. How do we get them into the banking system, which is far better than going to payday lenders or something like that? And Alice knows, even when I was the CEO of Bank One in 2000, we were one of the first to adopt the matricular card that gave people a chance to get into the banking system. And how can we make banks seem more friendly to people so they want to walk in a bank, and there's not a question of trust. They understand that we're there to help them and stuff like that. We're doing the same thing on small business loans. We're doing the same thing on affordable housing. We're doing the same thing on helping MDIs, minority depository institutions, of which I think there are like 40 or something like that, Latino ones. And so we're going to have this full spectrum of stuff. And we're going to have a bunch of test kitchens. But the important thing for the audience, it's going to be permanent, long-term, sustained effort. It's not just throwing a bunch of money and saying we did good. So we will be using philanthropy too, by the way. But even philanthropy, it will be targeted to accomplish outcomes that we want. More educated kids, more people in homes, so that you can measure, what's the effect of all the things you're trying to do. And as Alice, what we're doing is also not in conjunction, but also the BRT, which is 200 of the bigger companies in America, is going to try to do the same thing. What can those companies do to attack this problem, double down on it, and try to fix it? Because it's been a long time, and now I think there's a tremendous amount of support in our country to do big stuff.
Yeah. So Jamie, you and I have had a lot of conversations just about the wealth divide in this country, and the Federal Reserve issued a report, I think just yesterday, just on, at the end of 2019, what the median net worth was for a white household, 188,000, for a Latino household, 36, and for a Black household, 21, which was actually up for both Blacks and all three segments over 2017, but obviously a very big difference between white households and the minority white households. So you mentioned the BRT, and I know that even before, COVID-19, you have been very focused on redefining, right, the role of the corporation. I thought maybe you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so, the BRT had a statement, which I wasn't even aware of when I became chairman, that said it was basically about the primacy of shareholder value. That's why corporations exist. And it didn't really talk about long-term or short-term. It's just that you serve the shareholders. There's some truth to that. But then we were criticized by some press people, and they said, that's terrible. And I went and checked, and then I spoke to the directors. We had like 20 directors, CEOs of these companies. I said, that's not how we run these companies. When we wake up in the morning, and you all run companies too, what's the first thing you worry about is your customer? Do I make them happy? I don't want to lose them. I want them to come back another time. And how do you do that? Well, the way you do that is through your employees. And so those are really the two things. Those are more important than anything. Obviously, you have to have shareholder value because, I tell people, if you have a failing institution financially, you fail. And the fourth one is the one which is a little vaguer for people, is this: what do you do in communities? Now, I make it very personal. I'll give you two examples. Minor, a micro example and a macro example. If you run a corner bakery store in any community, you tend to participate in your community. You take the ice off the front so a little old lady doesn't break her legs. You help a local religious institution. If you have food left over at the end of the day, you probably drop it off at a homeless shelter. You participate. And if everyone helps their community, the community is better off, which is good for business too, by the way. But the macro one is a little more complicated, and where I think the BRT can be more effective. So we want to do that in every community we're in, by the way, be a local participant. But the macro one is more about policy. And so if you say, what are the policies that held back some of these minority communities? Well, education. It's not fair. You go to a lot of our communities, and through real estate taxes and stuff, they got these big, beautiful schools and stuff like that. You go to some of the inner cities, they don't have sports teams. They don't have lights on their playgrounds outside. We don't teach nutrition. We don't teach, some basic stuff. And that's not fair. Half the kids in inner city schools don't graduate, and it's even more important today that you graduate with skills that get you a job. So infrastructure is one, and infrastructure cuts across everything. But we know that better infrastructure, from housing to bridges to hospitals to tunnels, is better for communities. Small business formation. Sometimes we cripple our small business with red tape and bureaucracy. And, so it makes it harder for people who want to work hard to start that business, because they can't get paid for 6 months because they have to, get licensing and get three things or something like that. And so taxation, I'd put in that category where, taxes sometimes hurt growth. And I think that hurting growth is the worst thing. So you mentioned in 2019, I agree with you, the wealth gap is huge, but the incomes of minority folks in America were growing faster than ever, and unemployment is lower than ever in that fourth quarter. Part of that was because of growth strategies. So I tell people, when it comes to taxes, don't tax things that hurt growth. But I would put the category in that is when you tax labor too much, and you tax corporate formation too much, capital formation. You're not going to hurt growth if you tax a wealthy person on their income. And so I'm not saying you should. I'm just saying that's not the thing that slows down growth. So to me, the big issue is policy, regulation, taxation, infrastructure, immigration. There was a bill in Congress that Schumer and McCain had that DACA stays, which everyone wants. I don't know anyone who doesn't want that. A path to citizenship for undocumented, but law-abiding undocumented. And that's 12, and so tough path. That path is after like 12 years of waiting and getting to the back line and stuff like that. Merit-based, more merit-based immigration, and we can't get the bill passed. And most Americans want it, literally. The Republicans and Democrats want it. And you know what? That bill, the economists estimate it would help our economy grow at 0.3%. That one thing. Yeah. And why wouldn't we do it? So I'm big into this policy thing. So I think if a lot of business people spend more time fixing policy that we all think is good for the country, not just for our businesses. So when I go to Washington, sometimes I'm doing bank business, but much more I'm doing American business. What can we do to make the nation stronger? If we grow this country at 1% faster a year, which I personally think is achievable with good policies. I forgot the exact number, but at the end of 10 years, that's a huge amount of, I think it was $4 trillion of GDP. Yeah. $4 trillion. That's a lot of GDP per person, it's a lot of more tax revenues. And so if we do that, to me, it's going to be policy that's going to be the most important thing.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jamie. Now, we've got some questions from the audience that we want to take, Jamie. So I just want to have the team queue up the first question.
Hello, thank you so much for allowing me to participate today. My name is Dr. Erica Gonzalez, and I am President and CEO of South Texas Allergy and Asthma, and also Chairwoman of the San Antonio Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the nation's first and oldest Hispanic chamber. We understand that small business owners will rely on their own personal earnings or their personal savings and even home equity in order to be able to start their businesses or expand their businesses. With lack of access to affordable housing, many families are pushed out of these communities, resulting in less support for small businesses in these at-risk areas. We know that bridging the wealth gap will ensure that our communities have the opportunity to grow, especially during these pivotal times in our nation. While we understand that affordable housing helps small businesses succeed by providing some relief on the everyday residents, my question to the chairman is, can you talk to us about what program or resources are available at JPMorgan, or what initiatives you might be taking for people to have better access to affordable housing? And what can we as small business owners do to also help with the gap, even if we're not working directly in the finance or housing sectors? Thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome. It's a great question. So I'm going to answer, there's two things. One is helping build more affordable apartments or homes and stuff like that. And we do an extensive amount of work with local institutions. We call them CDFIs, community development financial institutions. If you want to know more, you can get it from Alice. She's an expert in this kind of thing. And we do about $2 billion of funding a year to those things. That do a lot of other major banks. And we're going to probably double that in the next couple of years. So that one thing in the communities that need it the most to get more affordable housing. Remember, locally, you all have to worry about land use laws. That a lot of the laws that get passed locally are the ones that stop people from making much more expensive affordable housing. The second one, and you mentioned, is mortgages. So we're making an extraordinary effort, and we're going to put more mortgage salespeople to LMI neighborhoods. We're going to try to open up that credit box. We're going to try to change government policy. But you mentioned something which just sticks in my go about bad policy. Because after the mortgage crisis, which, bad stuff happened and people got punished and stuff like that, but the rules that got put in place around mortgages, production, origination, servicing, litigation, et cetera, increased the mortgage cost by 30 basis points and reduced the availability dramatically. You know who for? Lower income people. And you mentioned something very important. That was a source of capital for a person to take out some money in a mortgage or increase the mortgage to start a business. Well, right now, because of laws and stuff, you're not allowed to do that by underwriting. So, we did it to this. I look at these policies. We did it to ourselves. So one of the things you're going to see us be pushing much harder is policy around mortgages to make it more available to people. Yes, it's a little riskier, but you have more mortgage home ownership and easier to take out, cash out mortgages to start a business. So there are a whole bunch of other things I can talk about, but those are really the most important.
Yeah, that was a great question. How about another one?
Mr. Dimon, good afternoon. My name is Nelson Rainieri, and I'm privileged to serve on the Board of Directors of the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for the opportunity to allow us to ask you a question, but I want to start by thanking you for two reasons. First is for Alice Rodriguez, our board chair. Her advice to us is invaluable. Secondly, for your vision and your commitment to creating an inclusive economy. I also serve as Senior Vice President for Liberty Power, one of the nation's largest Hispanic-owned businesses and one of a few nationally owned minority energy companies, something we'd like to see more of. Under your leadership, JPMorgan Chase has made tremendous progress in the areas of sustainability. Yet today we see too many consumers and small businesses having trouble accessing those benefits. I'd like to know your thoughts on what we could do together through the Chamber and through companies like Liberty Power to help extend those benefits to consumers and small businesses. Thank you again for your support to the Chamber.
Well, thank you, and thank you about the kind words about Alice. And of course, we've benefited from Alice for 33 years now, and so I'm thrilled she's taken on this new task. That's a great question, because this whole thing about climate change is real. We should do something about it, and we are probably, I don't know if we're the largest, but one of the largest investors in renewable energy. Think of solar, wind, et cetera, financing that, which we're going to continue to do, but. This gets so complicated, but I think we need a carbon tax basically at one point, and it's got to be fairly done so you don't hurt poor people more than wealthy people, stuff like that. But we're actually going through a lot of detail now about how do you get to a transition to cleaner energy in a way that works for businesses and consumers, because it's another area where done wrong, it'll hurt growth and it won't accomplish its goals. Done right, I think it could be almost cost-free. People start making different choices, and if you pay more for a big car, I tell people, is it a great sacrifice for an American if your car is a little bit smaller? No, you barely notice it, but it would cut CO2 dramatically, and so there are a lot of things to do, and I'm really not an expert how to get it to the consumers, other than we need to educate them about what these choices are and how to go about it, and to make sure policy is right to drive the right outcomes.
Let's take one more question from the audience.
Mr. Dimon, my name is Victor Arias. I happen to be a member of the board of directors of the USHCC. During the day, I am an executive search recruiter with a company called Diversified Search. Been in this business for 25 plus years with the big firms. I specialize in board of directors placements. And I've noticed that on your particular board, there are 10 members, 2 are women, 3 are women, and one of them is an African-American woman, but if you look at the entire board, she's the only one of ethnic diversity, and lacking is a member of the Hispanic community or the Latino community on your board. And just given the fact that Latinos represent the fastest growing not only demographic in terms of population, but also the economic contribution of this group. I'd love to hear more about, what your plans are for placing either another woman or even better, a Latina, and you have plenty in your office that are great leaders, but finding how that will change on your board. Thank you.
Yeah, you raise a very good point. So in fact, if you look at I always have a follow-up list, and it says Hispanic board member, because I forgot who pointed out that's absolutely true. So we have another woman hopefully joining soon. So it'll be one more woman, and I am looking for Black or Hispanic to add. So I do think diversity matters, and Hispanic's a big part of the population, and so you got names from me, but it's absolutely a legitimate concern, and hopefully I will fix that too.
So, Jamie, we'll do one more question and then just closing comments from you, because I know that we're almost at time. This definitely has been an extraordinary year. I mean, when you think about just the, social unrest in our communities, when you think about COVID-19, just so much, chaos and stress and anxiety. And we've obviously had a lot of great focus internally on our Black community, which I feel extremely proud about, by the way, and have really admired everything that my colleague Sekou has done to advance the agenda, particularly with advancing Black pathways. What's your vision for the Latino community?
Yeah. So, so we started advancing Black pathways a while back in recognition for how disadvantaged they've been literally since the Civil War. I mean, and one of the first things I did after that is I went to our Adelante, which I don't know if you were running at the time or something, which is our Hispanic Latino group, which is large. We have a tremendous amount in the United States and around the world, and we're in countries. We're in Mexico and Brazil and Peru and Spain and all these Hispanic and Latinx countries and stuff like that. And I said to them, "What can I do for you?" And basically they said, I don't know if you were in that room. They said, "Nothing. We're doing great. Just keep on. Oh, we need one thing." I said, "What's that?" They said they want a devoted resource to help them do stuff, which I immediately approved and on the spot. And while we don't have a Hispanic board member, I do want to point out that two of my direct reports are Hispanic. Daniel Pinto is Argentinian, who runs our global corporate investment bank. And by the way, a bunch of other Argentinians run big parts of this company. And Carlos Hernandez runs, and I forgot what country he's from, but from Central America, runs the U.S. investment banking division and stuff like that. So, and three of them are Brits. One is Black. So we have our management team is getting more and more diverse. Half are women. So I think that's great. So, but Alice, we're gonna double down on this effort to help the Latin community. And so everything we're talking about for Black Americans, we have a mirror image for Latin Americans. And so, and we're going to be announcing it. So we're going to be making big announcements, I'm hoping in the next 2 weeks, about the effort we're making. It's going to be very detailed. We're going to do some pilots in cities. We're going to do a whole bunch of different stuff. And I think we can make a huge difference. So we're there in heart, we're there in spirit, and we're going to be there with the full force of our company, which is capital, money, brains, and like I said, one of the most important things, a sustained effort. Not everything going to work. One of the differences with the company versus the government, if something doesn't work, I'll just stop doing it. Whereas, a lot of government programs don't work, they just don't stop. And they just become like a waste of money with vested interests, sucking onto that money. And so I think we're going to make a big difference. And Alice, of course, will be a big part of that.
Thank you, Jamie. And, we have been very, very focused on this statement that we really believe that the road to recovery from this recession, you've got to go through the Latino community. Henry Cisneros told us yesterday, by 2040, his estimation is we'll be 100 million strong from 60 million. He says a lot of people say it's 2050. He goes, I'm telling you, it's in 20 years. And I believe that when you see all of the great work that's come out of the Latino Donor Collaborative. They had a brand new research report that they published earlier, or last week rather. So we look forward, Jamie, to the partnership between JPMorgan and the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, because I think together, your point about policy and advocating for the right policies, as well as just putting the right programs together to empower these Latino businesses, we believe will make a very big difference in our economy. So I couldn't thank you enough for your leadership. It's been a real honor and pleasure to be a part of this organization for as many decades as I have. But more importantly, I look forward to this challenge of ensuring that JPMorgan is the leader and helping us really get our communities going.
Hey, Alice, thank you very much. I do appreciate being asked to talk to the chamber. And I'm just asking you all, keep the faith, folks. America is going to get better and better. You know, God knows we have flaws, but that doesn't mean that free enterprise, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, the opportunity we try to give people. So keep the faith in this country. And Alice, thank you all for having me.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.